Rules. Player's turn. During their turn, the players will be able to perform the following actions. Move orthogonally the number of squares of the value represented on your character card. For example, if the value is 4, you can move from 1 to 4 squares at your discretion. Characters cannot cross the walls. They will have to enter the rooms via the entrances, highlighted by a yellow halo, and where there is an open door. How to use the cards available in your hand. If the player has cards available, they can decide to play as many as they need based on their game strategy. They can also decide not to play any cards, with the exception of the room and horror cards, which force the players to use them immediately. Investigation. When you move on a token, you can investigate by drawing a card from the mystery deck. Once the character is above an investigation token, you will have to turn the green token to its red side, and you will no longer be able to investigate until the possessed is placed inside that room. In that case, you can turn the token over to the green side again. At the end of their turn, the player must always roll the die with 3 symbols on it. The X symbol means that nothing happens to the player. The skull indicates that he will have to draw a card from the horror deck, the one with a skull depicted on the back of the cards. He will have to read it aloud and immediately apply its effects. For example, in this case, he will lose a health point if the character is in a room, except the garden. There are mystery cards that can counteract some horror cards. Once you run out of cards in the horror deck, take them from the discard pile, shuffle them, and place them back in their slot. If the door symbol comes up on the die, the player will have to draw a room card, the one with the door depicted on the back, and will have to place the possessed above one of the entrances to the room present on the game board. If the possessed is in the room with the player at the end of their turn, the player will lose 1 health point. It should be noted that the possessed can only be placed inside the rooms. It can never be placed in the corridor. No character will be able to traverse a square occupied by the possessed. In the corridor, all players will be unharmed from the possessed girl's attacks, as there is no room card called corridor, while you will not be safe from the attacks coming from the video events. These will be unpredictable and can happen both in rooms and corridors. As with the horror deck, once you have finished the cards in the room deck, take them from the discard pile, shuffle them, and place the deck back in its slot. The video chapter will be explored in depth at the end of these rules. When you move on an investigation token, you can draw a card from the mystery deck and gain many advantages. Among the mystery cards, there are memory cards, which are objects linked to one of the rooms on the board. Drawing these cards will give you 2 advantages. The first is to exclude the corresponding room from those where the final exorcism will be performed. If you remember correctly, in the initial preparation phase, we removed a memory card and put it aside under the board. By exclusion, we must find the solution and discover in the room we need to perform the final ritual. A necessary condition for the final ritual is to have reduced the possessed resistance to 0. Returning to the topic of resistance, memory cards offer a second advantage. In addition to slowly guiding you to the solution, they will give you the opportunity to exorcise the room associated with the memory shown on the card in your hand. For example, in this case, skates are associated with the garage. Simply go to the garage and place a sacred chalice token on any square inside the exorcised room. Every time the possessed is placed in a room where a sacred chalice is present, she will lose a resistance point. The more rooms you manage to exorcise and the sooner you will manage to weaken the possessed, the more memories you will find, and the sooner you will understand which is the solution. You could also make an attempt without having the complete solution. But if by mistake, looking at the card put aside at the start of the game, you realize that it is wrong, the game is lost. It will also be possible to draw clue cards from the mystery deck. These cards benefit the player in various ways. To give some examples, they allow you to move more extra squares. to heal yourself and obtain health points, to draw the first 2 cards from the room deck, and to be able to predict in advance the next movements of the possessed. As previously stated, it is possible during your turn to use 1 or more clue cards or keep them aside to play them later in the game. There is no limit to the number of cards you can have. You can exchange or give cards to other players only if the characters are adjacent, while diagonally it is not possible. In the mystery deck, there is also a trap card which, as you can well imagine, does not bring anything good. Let's talk about the abilities of each character. Let's take the Exorcist and the Nurse as an example. You can use an ability at any time during your game turn. We can use it a number of times equal to the number of skill tokens present on our character board. In the specific case of the Nurse, she will be able to use it twice. The Nurse, for example, will be able to heal herself and restore a health point, both for herself or for another player adjacent to her. The Exorcist, on the other hand, if the possessed is within 3 squares, will be able to remove a resistance point from her. Every time you use a skill, you will have to remove a token from the character board. Winning the game. By excluding the various memories and rooms from time to time and reducing the resistance of the possessed to 0, whoever is in possession of the prayer book, in this case the Exorcist, will be able to carry out the final exorcism ritual in that room. Go to the room that you think is the right one, specifying the object that the girl sacrificed. Pause the video and hope you have guessed correctly the card set aside at the start of the game. Otherwise, you will lose. If the Exorcist is eliminated during the game, losing all his health points, place the prayer book in the square where he was eliminated. At this point, any player will have to retrieve the prayer book by moving to that square and then placing it on their board in the item slot. Only the one who is in possession of the book will be able to perform the final exorcism.